Welcome to another episode of Nothing Moves Without Us, a Black culture podcast. On every episode, Clifford and I discuss shows, movies, and music from the past 30 plus years that have played a pivotal role in the Black experience.
We are the culture, nothing moves without us. We are the culture, yeah.
We are culture, nothing moves without us.
Okay, I don't care about that.
Yeah, I'm ready. Come on, of course I'm ready. Are you taking us in or am I taking us in?
It's already on. We already in. We already in, man.
I don't even know. I'm about to edit this out.
I'm leaving this as is, man. Welcome back, man. What's up?
Yeah, this is such a it is so incredible starting off our podcast the way we start them off because we're just us. We're just authentically us. So shout out to you for being authentically you, fam.
Just having fun, man. Having fun. Salute to you too.
It feels good to be back as always. I know that it's been a hell of a week for me. How about you? How's your week been?
My week's been good, man. I don't know. Things just be good for me, man. I don't know. I don't think I'll have a low moment. I may have a low day, but overall, man, I'm just focused on getting it. When we talked about earlier about you said we both were cynical, and I was like, nah. I think I would become more optimistic than you. In the past, I was definitely cynical. I know a lot of people used to call me king of cynicism, but I've changed my perspective, man. It's growth. It's healing. And my perspective is just, it could be worse, right? And if things could be worse, then this is good. I'm always going to try my best to be upbeat and positive about whatever life's throwing at me, because this is it.
Yeah, I'm not going to accept that. I hear you, but I'm not accepting that I'm more cynical than you. I am definitely cynical, but I don't know if I'm more cynical than you just yet. But we'll have to do a test at some point. But the old Clifford I know was definitely way different than who you are now. That is true.
I got the blues. Absolutely.
I am also someone who, it depends on the situation. It really depends on the situation for me to look at it from an optimistic standpoint, or for me to be like, yo, this shit is not gonna work.
What's something that you've been cynical about over the years? Something that's just you're still cynical about over the years?
I feel like we've talked about it, but the holidays, man, I'm very cynical when it comes to the holidays. Hence, something we were going to dive into today is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I just feel like some of the holidays, especially this one, they're uncalled for, and I don't really get the point. And I understand celebrating, and I understand what they're created and what they're supposed to mean, but to me, they don't mean those things. To me, it's a lot of bullshit. So holidays for sure have been something I've been cynical about.
So, what does Martin Luther King Jr. mean on the surface for you? What's the BS part of it for you?
Well, I think Martin Luther King Jr. as a person and what he represents is totally different than what happens around the holidays, around his holiday. But what he means to me is someone who, pretty much as everybody else, someone who fought for civil rights, someone who pushed, Black people forward, push equality forward. And that's something that I admire and appreciate about him. But I think from a holiday standpoint, it's like I hear more people asking about getting a day off than what he represents and what he, and then I also think a lot of times, and it's not only Martin Luther King Jr. Day, but other holidays like Juneteenth and so on. A lot of these holidays, to me, they're just a one-day thing. Like, people don't really practice this around all year round. And it's not perfect, right? Black people still getting killed, and we are moving the needle. But I just think these holidays, the way we celebrate them, and I know specifically more around this year, Martin Luther King Jr.'s family was like, hey, don't celebrate the holiday because there's so many issues that was still going through around voters' rights and voting rights. So they're like, what he fought for was still dealing with to this day. And to me, that is even more eye opening and aligns with how I think about the holiday more than anything. So
yeah, it's like always just kind of comparing where we are now to where we were 20, 30, 40 years. And like, I guess answering the question myself, like I'm cynical about the Black experience because it still doesn't, to your point, it still doesn't feel like there's really been any true progress. The progress just feels relative to the time that we in. Like it just happened naturally because we have the internet, we have social media, and we're more aware. But the big picture growth, big picture changes just haven't really happened. So yeah, I feel that too, man.
yeah, I think I'm also someone who is very, very much so like with everything happening with the Black Lives Matter movement and George Floyd and all that have been happening over these years, and seeing these corporations and these leagues jump into kind of the mix because they're like, oh, we're finally we're ready to support, or finally we're ready to be a part of this. So seeing it like on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the NBA did a whole slate of things where they talked about some of his speeches and they had shirts and things like that. To me, all that shit is so corny. Like I don't mean it. I get it, but it's just so corny to me. Like this is something that what he stands for is something that should be talked about all the time. It shouldn't just be we're wearing these shirts on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It's just that's just me. But I get why everybody's getting into it now. So I accept it for what it's worth.
Right. So real quick, I'm not sure if you saw or heard the comment that Biden made. I'm reading this from the independent.co.uk. Even Dr. King's assassination did not have the worldwide impact that George Floyd's death did.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Just like television changed the civil rights movement for the better when they saw Bill Connor and his daughters ripping the clothes off of elderly Black women going to church and fire hoses ripping the skin off of young kids. It's in one way, right? It's like how you tarnish someone's legacy, right? You like something I've been thinking about is thinking about the height of the Black experience and the significance of certain times. So during the civil rights era, we have the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and Medgar Evers, and they were like the height representatives of the Black experience. And nowadays, more modern times, right? The height of the Black experience is related to hip hop, rap music, and you get the assassinations of Biggie Smalls. You get Tupac. For me, you get XXXTentacion because he was a young rapper who was supposed to, influence the future. And at times, it feels like I want to tread on this lightly. The people who get murdered, I think, kind of represent where the culture is, right? There are no current leaders who are doing the work of the aforementioned pioneers. Everyone's kind of playing it safe, and the only Black leaders that are dying are related to music. Like there are no activists in the Black experience dying. Everyone's just kind of towing a line, and it feels becoming, and it kind of adds on to the cynicism and knowing that, or feeling that no one's really willing to die, no one's really willing to fight to bring the change and growth that the Black experience needs. It's really just kind of the acceptance and feeling included and getting the bag at the end of the day, right? Everyone's out here just focused on getting the bag, and it's sad, man. It's sad. And the other side of it is always like, we don't need leaders, we don't need individuals champion it, but the issue is always that the people who reach these heights and levels of success, they front and they perpetrate the fraud, like they're willing to put the Black experience on their back and they're here for the Black experience. But once that check comes in, once the right person's in the air, they flip. And the Black experience is just what it always has been. For me, it feels like.
Oh, so yes, you're spot on, man. I recently listened to, or someone suggested that I check out Malcolm X's conversation at, I believe it was UC Berkeley, and he just talked about a number of things, but it's like a 40-minute conversation, and he talks about how Black leaders, especially back in those times, where a lot of them were basically pawns of the rich white, their rich white, not so much counterparts, but uh, funders or endorsers. So they were basically being endorsed to speak to the Black community in a certain way or speak for the Black community in a certain way. And he was asking the interviewer, like, name one. He's like, could you name one of our leaders who is not tied in or is not a pawn of some sort? And the guy was just throwing out names, and Malcolm X was like, "No, not him. No, not him." And I think that there's a similar thing happening. As you may be. This is, and I'm gonna jump off subject a little bit, but this is kind of why I look at Kanye the way I look at Kanye, and how much some of the things he says it makes a lot of sense. He goes off the rails sometimes, but it makes a lot of sense about the influence of wealth and how wealth plays a huge part in the who's in our country and our world. Living in a capitalist society, so it's kind of the same thing with Malcolm. Malcolm's like, hey, if these millionaires, billionaires are giving Black leaders money to just kind of speak up and keep us at bay, they're just as much as a problem. And that's something that I still see to this day. So, but I agree with you 100%. It's exactly, and that's why I got nothing against people celebrating these holidays. You do what's best for you, but you're not going to see me post about it. You're not going to see me highlight it, because I feel like it's not authentic. I think a lot of people just do it because it's the day, so they're just throwing it out there, and everybody has their reasons. So I don't want to downgrade someone's reason for doing it, but I know I'm not going to participate in it because it's not something I truly believe in.
Right. So earlier I was thinking, when you brought up the specific holidays, you brought up Juneteenth, and the idea that it's only that one day. My mind kind of went to, like, is it supposed to be just that one day, right? Like when we did the clubhouse last week, we did the Kwanzaa clubhouse. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? Excuse me.
I think it was
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So some people that were in the room with us, they were talking about like living the principles, like the Living the Principles podcast, and knowing that it isn't just the day, it isn't just the holiday, but finding a way to incorporate principles and the values that we pause and reflect in certain time periods, whether it's a specific holiday or a few days like Kwanzaa, finding a way to incorporate it into our lives, and knowing that through incorporating the principles, through living the principles and embodying the work of these people that we champion on an everyday basis, right? Not every day, Martin Luther King and all that. Just, today's his day, and like reflect on what I've done so far to start the year to embody his message, and what do I plan to do for the rest of the year to embody his message, and feeling that and knowing that. I think that's part of the issue, right? I look at it as the lack of culture. Like the Black experience doesn't really have a culture. The culture is always shifting, and a lot of the culture feels like it's rooted within hip hop. Rooted within rap music. We talked about I said hip hop and rap are not the same anymore, but without having a individualized culture that isn't rooted within the system and the structure of the oppressive nature of the American experience, the holiday, to your point, and like with everything you said, the holidays are just virtue signaling, right? There's opportunities. Like, think about how coincidental it is, right? This whole Voting Rights Act is going on, then it's Martin Luther King, and then they use it as a tool to fuel their message. Yeah, man. It's disheartening. I'm cynical about it, but I'm optimistic, and this is the work. Hoping that the conversations that we have propel our individual experiences, with which they have, right? We both did Kwanzaa for the first time in our
Absolutely.
lives, right? So that's all we can do, man. All you can do as an individual, all I can do as an individual, and you Thomas, you whoever's listening, is just do your individual work and know that the individual work that you do is going to propel the Black experience, or hope, not even hope. Know that in the back of your mind, whatever you do innately propels and redefines the Black experience. Like I know
Yeah,
for you, sorry, real quick. I know for you, we talked about like you saying you're a humanist, right? Like you don't necessarily do things like I need to do this to propel Blackness. I'm just doing things as a human. I know I'm Black. I'm aware of that, and you innately know that because you doing it, it's gonna enhance and enrich the Black experience. Date while you wait, bro. Like that's beautiful, man. Like I was excited to see you on TV, man. Like I keep it a buck. I was excited to see you on TV, see you and the growth, right? Like you was on it was on Fire Stick initially. I forget the platform. You got an
yeah.
Emmy. It's on NYC TV now. You on cabs. You on subways, and that's it, man. That's the representation, and it just comes from the work, man. So yo, salute to you. Even though you cynical, you're doing the work. You're doing the work, and that's all that matters, man.
Well, I'm gonna keep it real cynical and be like, yeah, whatever, man. Nah, I appreciate it. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I'll end it. I'll end saying this. Uh, if you're someone who is going to sign a petition for, I don't know, voting rights or for something from a civil rights standpoint, because because it's Martin Luther King Jr. Day, would you do that same thing if it was the middle of August on a Sunday in
Right.
August? Would you have that same energy? And that's how I see it. In my head, I'm like, do you think to yourself, what will Martin Luther King Jr. do before I sign this petition or
Right.
before I do this thing? And if you are somebody who does that, then I salute you for that. But if you're somebody who is only doing this because it's a holiday, you might want to rethink that. Or you might want to look and educate yourself.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Keep that same energy, right? Perpetually keep that same energy, man. PJs. Let's transition. So season 2, man. Season 2. What were some of your initial thoughts and feelings going into season 2? Post our conversation.
Yeah, I quite honestly, I didn't really see a difference. It was very similar to season 1. I think I don't think it's a problem. I don't think that there's a problem that it's that way. But again, it's a claymation animation show, so it's not like a different world, or it's not like a Family Matters. So it's a little different on how they develop and how they change. But when I watched the first couple episodes of season 2, it reminded me very much so of season 1. It wasn't really too much difference. I did notice certain characters get more light, more shine,
Right.
but it just seemed like season 1 never ended. It seemed like season 1 was just continuing. There was no, usually you see in shows a you see something that changes. It can be the intro. It can be certain characters. It can be maybe locations. So maybe they were season 1 was primarily at home and season 2 was at a university.
Right.
With the PJs, it was to me exactly. It just continued the story. So yeah, how about you?
I like what you said. It made me think that, like, when you watch live action series, right? The budget increases over the season, so they have more money to do new scenes. So like
Yeah,
maybe they didn't increase the budget, and it was just like the same scenes over and over again. Yeah, I kind of said that earlier. It feels like the same. Like the theme overall feels the same, and I find myself losing interest. And that's just the way I am with anything nowadays. Like it reminded me, growing up, right? The Simpsons was the go-to cartoon for a lot of us. And at one point, I was watching The Simpsons. I'm like, it's just the same thing. Homer does something stupid. Marge forgives him, and they get back together. I'm like, this is boring, and I just stopped watching it, and that's what it started feeling like with the PJs. Like the first season was funny, the first few episodes are funny. I get it, it's original, but then when it's just the repetitive themes, I just lose interest. Season 2 did have some good standout episodes, like you talked about, featuring or giving other characters more light. Like those are great episodes that I like. There's one especially with Juicy that I want to talk about,
Yeah.
but overall, it's just the same formula, which I get, which works, but I need growth to kind of keep me involved, and I need unique stories to kind of keep me engaged in the show.
Yeah, I think another thing that was missing is, after watching season one, what was the great climax, right? What was the great thing that the great grand thing, the wow moment? And I just don't have one. Whereas a lot of shows, there's a wow moment usually in the last episode of the first season, and then going into second season, they they enhance it. So maybe someone gets married, or maybe someone passes away, or something that starts the next season, and you're like, man, I'm really looking forward to this. And
But
I just
are you comparing that to other cartoons or live actions? Because I feel like I can't think of many cartoons that have dynamic shifts in the first or last episode of a season.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would definitely say to live action.
Okay.
And that's a fair point. But I also don't quite remember watching other animations or cartoons that are focused on the last episode of a season and the beginning of the next. So
Right.
maybe I should look into that. But it's hard to compare because this was the first of its kind. So I can be like, I was a big Batman and Spider-Man kid growing up, and I know they've had a lot of different seasons and had a lot of different storylines, but I can't compare that to the PJs.
Right.
Like that's not fair. So I think that's a great question. I would say what I was looking for is something that I was used to, and because I didn't get it I lost interest as well. But there were some episodes that were sprinkled in there that had potential. That I was like, okay, this is really cool. And I have to be again, very fair in this by saying the show is extremely offensive. It's extremely offensive. I feel like it gets way worse in season 2. Some of the things that I saw, but with that being the case, it's still Eddie Murphy's story. It's still his truth, and I accept that for what it is. And when I watched it, I was trying to be very open minded with it, but some of the stuff that was happening, I just was like, oh my god, what is why did they take this?
Right.
So yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. It's funny that you brought up being offensive because we talked about this in the last episode. I still haven't found. I don't think I found anything offensive. I I think after our conversation, it just kind of rewired my brain just to kind of take it for what it is, take it for for the art that it is. Like one of the things we talked about was Smokey, right, and how they humanized him. And I was watching it in mind, thinking about what you said. Like they never show him actually using drugs. They just show him, not strung out, but just his usual self. And I think little things like that, little awarenesses like that, take away from me from wanting to not wanting but feeling offended, because I think that if you're smart enough to not insert that into the series, for me it feels like you still have a message overall, right? It like we talked about, and you talked about how Smokey was like he's like the smartest person in the block, right? He's the
Smartest
smartest
person.
person in the building.
Yeah.
And we could get into some Smokey episodes later on also, but yeah, I find it interesting that you found you started taking offense to some of it, and I just took it for what it is
Yeah.
because the other layers stood out to me a bit more.
Yeah, so just to be clear, I didn't take offense to it, but it was offensive. So like watching it, again, you and I know what it is. We know what we're getting ourselves into, and I believe that someone who is continuously watching the show, they know what they're watching. But there were things happening in the show that if I was someone back in 1999 watching this animation for the first time, it would be offensive. I'll be offended by. watching it right now, obviously we have a different perspective because we're watching it because we're going to be dissecting it. But there's certain parts I saw and I'm like, yo, that's offensive. And then I'm laughing my ass off because it's hilarious. So,
do you remember any off the top of your head? No pressure if you do.
Absolutely, man. I wrote them down. In episode 13, or I'm lying, not episode 13, episode 5, Haiti and the Tramp.
Right. I remember.
That episode was just out of control. Like some of the things, like the whole scene is a scene where Walter, which Walter, he's not a new character, but he was just getting hella shine this season. I feel like he was in almost every episode. He was just getting a lot of shine, which was cool. He had his reasoning and the reason why he was being highlighted. And but I feel like it was our first introduction to Walter being this like ladies' man who's addicted to sex and that's all he wants. He doesn't want to settle down. And him and Haiti lady, they're always going at it. But to me, when I was watching it, I was thinking about these domestic violence because they literally argued, and it led to sex. And then they would break it down. They would be like, hey, we suck at as a couple, but when we argue, we have bomb sex. And in my head, I was just like, it's kind of like that can be something like that's in some ways promoting,
toxic relationship.
yeah. So episodes like that, and then just I'll stick to that episode. Just the process on how it went along and the jokes about him, the dick jokes, and it was just a lot of over the top things that if you're paying attention, you're like, wait, did they just say that?
Right.
And that was just one of the episodes, but it happens all the time. And like I said, I can see how someone who's watching this for the first time, someone who's not familiar with the show, can be offended by it. I wasn't, but I was just like, yo, this is a little too much.
I like that you bring that episode up because when I was watching it, we talked about in the last episode, we talked about the characters have a reality to them. So when I saw Walter in that episode, I automatically thought of someone I knew who's my age, who acts exactly like that. And I was going to text him and be like, yo, bro, you remind me of Walter from the PJs. Because the same type of demeanor. But I understand how it comes off as being toxic. And I think it's more so like within our culture and how we view relationships. But, my perspective is there's an awareness to it, right? It's not, they weren't using each other. They weren't taking advantage of each other. They both were like, hey, this is the only dynamic that works for us. So let's just keep enjoying it as much as we can. That's kind of my perspective on it. But come on, I definitely hear that.
Let's be real. It took them the entire episode. Haiti lady was all over Walter. It got to a point where Walter was scared to speak up for himself, and Super had to. Matter of fact, Super tried to help but couldn't even help. So they went through this whole process of not being honest, not being forthcoming. She started showing up to his things. He was getting frustrated. And it was just way too, it was exactly what, to your point, I've seen it before.
It was too real for you. That's the problem. It was too real for you.
It was too real for me.
Okay. I get that, man.
But the episode was hilarious. Haiti lady's like, man, I wish I could find love. I want to get married, da, da, da. And then she's like, Walter, you're going to be my husband. And that was fun. And that was funny. And, again, you're absolutely right. It's how you take it, how you take it in. Even they had a little sex scene where Walter is like, she's trying to talk to Walter, and he's like, "How about I get back in that?" Like, and she's like, "No, Walter, I'm being for real." And he's like, "I'm being for real too." And then she has him handcuffed to the bed, and it's just like, what is happening here? I thought it was hilarious, but again, it was it could be a little too much.
The show wasn't for kids. I think that's I think season 2 made me realize that it wasn't for kids. I think that's the realization too. The show wasn't meant for children.
The beginning of the episode is hilarious because Super comes out of the bathroom with his guitar and he's like, "I got the Better Not Go in There blues." I thought that was hilarious. And yeah, it just, I feel like by the time you get to an episode like that, you know what you're walking into because you've been watching the show.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I guess like tying in with character development, and there really isn't any, right? And everyone kind of stays the same, and that's actually something I was thinking about. And maybe it's really just an animated thing. I think that might really be it, because you brought up Batman, you brought up Spider-Man, and I remember watching Spider-Man on Channel 5. That was my joint. That's one of the best cartoons ever. But there's no growth, right? Every episode is kind of its own standalone episode. There's rarely a recap on something that happened in a previous episode unless it's to be continued. So on one aspect, I'm thinking, like we said, it's just the way animated series are. Everything is kind of its standalone. Every character has to stay the same because that's just what the characters are. But I was also thinking that the not pessimistic, but I guess the funny side of it could be that people just don't like the projects. Just doesn't change, right? Like this is just how it is in the projects all the time. And maybe that's another angle that they kind of they thought about. But yeah, that was my other perspective.
I think what. Oh, go ahead. Finish your thought.
No, I was just gonna say that. Yeah, it feels like there's no development in any of the characters. Everyone is everyone.
Yeah, I think where they missed or where they dropped the ball is they had so many incredible personalities. There were episodes where you see more about Mrs. Stubbs, right? Mariel. You see more about her. You see more. They go more into Juicy. They go more into Calvin, Walter. I think there were some opportunities missed there. They would get into these characters and then they'll have a brief stint, and again, I haven't watched every single episode. Like a lot of episodes, so I haven't watched every single one. But the episodes I did watch, I feel like it was the same old supers doing something, and everybody's trying to either be a part of it or not be a part of it.
Right.
And that was the overarching theme. Which it could have been cool if they had an episode maybe talking about maybe you see Calvin or not Calvin. What's the other
Juicy?
Juicy. You see him at home in his apartment. Maybe it's an episode about him and his dad or something like the episode
right,
where
so
he's.
I'm going to cut you off. So there's an episode 12. What's eating Juicy Hudson? Did you see that one?
I did not watch it in season 2. No.
Right. So that is one of my, and I guess we can kind of transition to standout episodes. That's one of that's one of the best episodes I've watched. And again, sorry to cut you off, but
no, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Because it's about Juicy. It's about Juicy and his dad. And I realized I didn't even realize that the big Mr. Hudson was his dad when we talked about it in the last episode. Yeah. I didn't make that connection. I just thought he was like a random dude. But the entire episode is about Juicy. Like young kids having to take care of their family, right? Young kids having all these responsibilities and taking care of people that they shouldn't have to. So the episode is Juicy taking care of his dad, who is obese. He can't get out of the house. Taking care of his mom, feeding them. They do like just being like I don't want to use the word slave. Being if you could think of a different word, let me know. Just being a servant for them. There we go. Being a servant for them, and not being able to be free, not being able to be a kid. And he asked Super to build him a treehouse. So Super builds him a treehouse, and Super's trying to connect Juicy with his dad. And he makes like a can phone. And he's, I put this mirror here so your dad could look, so you can see your dad in the mirror and he can see you. And I put this can here so you could talk to your dad because he can't get out of the house. And Juicy's like, I don't want to see him. I don't want to talk to him. I want to just be here and have this for myself, like, because he doesn't have anything for himself. And his dad is at home. His dad is listening. And, it's like this emotional, heartfelt scene. And, they resolve the issue. But it's the reality of young kids having all these excessive responsibilities that they don't have. It's the I guess the struggle for like independence in a family, right? Like we talked about Juicy, being a chef one day and possibly, hopefully, right? The goal is for your child to be better than you. But seeing that dynamic and seeing that if Juicy stays under being a servant under the umbrella of his family, his mother and father forever, that he has no future, he has no potential. So I think this episode, like it ends with his father having a better understanding and them being more lenient on him and not just making him responsible for taking care of them because he's a kid and he shouldn't have to.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I'm talking about. Where that sounds great. I haven't seen the episode, but it sounds like something that could have been, it could have been extended on, right? Maybe it could have been 2 episodes or 3 episodes in this season about Juicy and how obviously there was a lesson learned in that particular episode, but I feel like there are more dynamics to him than that. Like I feel like a lot of episodes I see him in, he's smarter than what he thinks. He
Right.
does things in that. So exploring that, and to be completely fair, we don't know. I don't know if they explore that in the next season, but I do know that overall, that could have been a great way to develop the character. So I definitely need to check out that episode. I know for me, season 2, episode 1 was out of all episodes I watched was probably my favorite. And I always talk about.
Oh yeah, that was a good one.
Well, I always talk about how much I love Smokey. Smokey's literally one of my favorite characters. And what really stood out to me in that episode was the fact that Smokey tutored Super on how to get his GED. And he like really tutored him. Like he really like went through like science and math. And it was so cool to me to see Smokey do that. And to give some quick background, the episode starts with the teachers going on strike at the school. So Super Thurgood, he decides, him and Mario, they decide to homeschool Calvin and Juicy, and they come up with this whole elaborate plan on how to do it. Then they go down to HUD to get the proper curriculum for everything, and they're like, well, are you guys teachers? You need certifications? And everybody's good essentially except Super. Kind of find out he's never graduated or got any certificates or diplomas.
Was it from high school, junior high school, or did he never graduate? I forget.
They didn't get that deep into it, but I'm assuming it's high school. He never got a diploma, so he ends up joining them in the homeschooling process. So it's him, Calvin, and Juicy as students, and he's like the troublemaker. He's like,
and Muriel was a teacher, right?
Well, all of them are teachers. Mario's a teacher. Miss Avery's a teacher.
Right.
Mr. Chan is a teacher. They all were teachers from different subjects. And Super's just acting a fool. And at first it's really funny. And then Calvin and Juicy are like, "Listen, man, like this is getting old, bro. Like now it's time to learn."
Right.
And he goes through all this, and then out of nowhere, he's like complaining to Smokey, and Smokey's like, "Super, this is what you need," and he ends up tutoring him to take like an exit exam or an assessment, and he ends up passing. He ends up passing utilizing his frustration. So he's basically calling the educators and the tests, the whoever is taking care of as far as grading the tests. He's going off on them, but on the flip side, he's answering all these questions right, and he ends up getting his diploma. And I just found it to be such a cool episode. One, because of Smokey, but two, it was just really cool to see him go through that process. And a lot of us go through that or went through that in education, where we were working, we didn't really focus on school, and then there's that one moment in your life when you need it, when you need that piece of paper for whatever reason. Right. And he was able to get it. So I really appreciated that. And again, Smokey's my guy, man. I love me some Smokey. So that was definitely one of my favorite episodes.
I really... Go ahead.
No, go ahead. That's all I got.
I really liked that episode because I looked at it as a power of community. We talked about community a lot in the first episode. And the importance of having diversity in your life, because everyone offered a different subject, right? I know Mr. Sanchez, did he teach Spanish? Was he doing Spanish?
Yeah.
Right. And I forget what the other characters were teaching, excuse me, but every main character offered a different subject. And, granted it's comical, and granted, they're not experts in it, but the message behind it is knowing that when the the system can't provide for you, you should be able to go to your community, able to go to your neighbors and get that balance you need, right? Like imagine there being more kids in the building, and imagine that's just what it is, right? Like, I go to the fourth floor to Miss Avery to learn about civics. Then at 2 p.m. I go to the third floor to Sanchez to learn Spanish. And I think again, for me, it speaks about the power community and having, I guess, that diversity in the people you spend time with, the people you live around, and knowing that everyone has something they can kind of offer you. Yeah, that was the main thing for me for that episode.
Yeah, I love that. Everybody participated. No one complained, and they did what they had to do. And then at the end of the episode, Thurgood's like, he's like, I don't know if I can. And Muriel's like, "School, you're good. The teacher's not on strike anymore. They're going back. You're fine." And you can just see how happy he was for that. But yeah, that episode was a great start to the season. And like you said, I couldn't agree more. It reminded me of episode 1 of season 1 as well. Just that ability for the community to come together. Yeah.
My second, I have a second standout episode. It was episode 6, Smokey the Squatter. Did you get a chance to see that?
I haven't seen it. No.
So this is when I think it's like real cold outside, and Super allows Smokey to like spend one night. He's supposed to spend one night in one of Super's like hidden rooms, rather hidden apartments that no one knows about, that he uses for himself. So he tries to kick Smokey out, but Smokey, being an educated person that he is, he knows that he has squatter rights. So Super goes to HUD and he's like, he's damn crackhead, blah, 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 trying to stay. And they're like, well, you let him stay for the night. So somehow Super gets everyone to rally against Smokey. And this was the clip that I sent you, and I was trying to post to TikTok, but they muted it so no one could see it. So Super has like this angry mob, and they're like, yeah, let's get him. So BB walks in, and she's like, where is he? Where is that no good low life? And you see Smokey, and on like I forgot what you call it. He's like in a nook. He has a pink bathrobe on, and he's just reading a book with the sun behind him. And the joke is that he's supposed to be the savage and the low life, but he's just a sophisticated, refined man. And they're the true monsters, man. And I love that. And again, it made me think about what you say about Smokey just being refined, right? Outside of him doing drugs, or outside of him having an addiction, man, he is cultured, he is developed, and he is refined. And I thought that was dope, man. I know Smokey's your go-to, so I won't steal that. But I always appreciate every episode that like puts him in a good light. There's also that episode where him and Super are doing a comedy special. Did you see that one?
No.
It's called the HJs. Thurgood opens a radio station, and they just have this act that they're like a comedy act, and it's a dope episode because it's Smokey and Super working together. Like they have the radio station, but people love Smokey's act. But people think Smokey is funnier than Super. Super gets jealous of him and like kicks him off. But then they kind of reconcile. I get it, man. I like seeing Smokey be the highlight. I like the humanization of him.
Yeah, I love it, man. I'll definitely be checking out those episodes. I know for me, I watched the episode. What was it? Who the Boss, episode 9, when 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 Super's boss, he has to do an evaluation on him, and his boss dies.
Right.
So he comes up with this plan on how to get Mr. Who to be, I guess Mr. Ho, Jimmy Ho, to be his boss, but then it kind of backfires because Miriam ends up writing the evaluation and becoming a supervisor, and he's like treating her like like it shows how terrible of a super he is. The whole project is just falling apart, breaking apart, and it's just a hilarious episode. But what ends up happening is they have I guess it's a thermostat or some type of boiler. Like they have a boiler in
Right.
the basement where it's having issues, and he's kind of been finding unique ways to keep it from having an issue. But because Mario is now his new boss, she's like, you got to do it by the book, and it ends up showing that the fact that he doesn't do it by the book in some ways, and sometimes it's actually a good thing.
Right.
And he ends up saving the day because the boiler's about to explode, and he uses a lot of his tactics that he's been using all this time before she became his boss. But it was really cool to see him be able to redeem himself. I feel like she was shit on him the whole episode, and rightfully so. He
Right.
deserved to get he's a terrible super, but it goes to show you sometimes you gotta go, but you can't follow you can't follow the book or everything. Sometimes you have to think outside the box,
Right.
and I just really dig that. And at the end, him and her smooch a little bit, but I mean, I was cracking up when he made himself like a suit out of all the rubber. And it just had me dying. And he made him some goggles, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna save this project."
Right.
So that was definitely another one of my favorite. And the one that was pretty much the funniest to me was episode. I think it's the last episode, episode 17. And there are two I like, but episode 17 when he goes to jail when Walter tells him the best medical care is in jail. So he gets
Right. Right.
arrested.
Right.
He gets arrested to just get dental work. And Walter, like, I'm still trying to figure out if Walter set him up, but Walter is a parole officer. I believe he used to be a cop, and
Right.
now he's retired.
Probably,
And
I think he got kicked off the force because he be scamming. He be scamming.
yeah, so this episode shows him as like a capital scammer. Like he's pulling all his tricks out of the bag. Every time something happens, he'll go whisper in the person's ear, and they'll take it back. And it was just, man, that episode had me down when they went to heaven and Walter whispered in God's ear to make sure, so God could show Super some mercy. And he's like, man, thank you so much. That episode had me dying, man. So there are a lot of really cool episodes, and they're definitely funny. But it also shows like a really like true. There's a lot of truth in it, in
Right.
a lot of what you're seeing. You're like, yo, I can see, like, I know someone, like you said, I know someone in my life, or I know someone in the community that's literally that person. And I just thought that was really, really cool.
Yeah. So, what about overall themes for you? I know we talked about a few in the first episode. We brought up some today, but kind of reiterating. What were some overall themes for you that you're feeling or seeing in the show?
Yeah, again, it's very similar to season one, right? It's the community aspect. Like, yeah, community is the biggest thing. Like, I remember there's an episode where Super finds out he's related to Thomas Jefferson.
I didn't see that one.
So there's an episode where he's like going through his family. Miriam finds like a album or maybe his Bible, some like a
Okay.
family book, and
Episode 13, the Jeffersons.
she finds out he's related to Thomas Jefferson, and he runs for office, and then he gets bribed. Some random person bribes him, and they want to turn the community into bring liquor stores into the community. So they rig the election. He ends up getting into office, and in order to get out of it, he has to come up with a fake assassination. He has to fake his death, and the whole community comes together to fake his death. So they're all doing things to try to fake his death.
Right.
And at the end of the episode, they end up faking it, and he ends up getting away. But to answer your question, it's just primarily, I feel like every episode there's a level of community there, and it's always a unique thing. It's never the same. It's always totally different on how they all come together and how they connect. So that was big. And then I also didn't look at it before season one, but how much HUD and government assistance and the government plays a role in things. I feel like every episode there was something that had to do, or every episode I watched, there was some importance or something that where HUD played a role. Like,
Right.
you know, with with Haiti when Haiti lady was getting married to Walter. HUD was it was at HUD. When they were getting information about schools, they went to HUD for that. I feel like every episode there's something where HUD plays a role, and it reminded me of how much even Mr. Ho or Jimmy Ho, he's always talking about how how he's using government assistance and how he's taking over, and it just I thought that's a theme that I've noticed, which I didn't really pay attention in season one, but season two I feel like every episode I watched, HUD played a huge role in the episode. Even with the education episode when he had to take the test and things like that. So those are really the two that I really noticed. How about yourself?
Yeah, same thing with Community. I think that's been one of the most positive aspects of this show. Just looking at the importance of community and knowing that no matter what beef you had with someone yesterday or the day before, at the end of the day, you're going to do right by the community because you're kind of all you got. And I think that kind of ties in with what you were saying about HUD. There's an episode 14 called Robin Hood. And I guess that's a play on word with Robin Hood. They need a new filter system. Did you see that one?
I didn't know.
All right. So they need a new filter system because the water. They need a new filter system for the building because the water is like green and gunky. So Thurgood goes to HUD for a new filter system, and they're telling him, they don't have any more. So he makes a scene, and they're dragging him out. And actually, he gets everyone in the community to go down there to like march on HUD. And as they're dragging him out, he looks into the room and he just sees this room with just filters all over. So they make a plan to go rob HUD late at night. And Miss Avery, like she's a grifter. Like in her past life, she was a grifter. She was scheming and scamming and stealing. So they all have different jobs, and they do like the dead president face mask with the white and black, and everyone has a different job. Everyone has a different expertise. They use Smokey to get rid of the fence. Like he pees on the electric fence that brings you in the HUD, and he takes the electrocution, and him being electrocuted like burns a hole in the fence. Then they walk through it. Miss Avery, she's like the not escape artist. I forget the exact name, but the person who can like go through lasers and all that and not get caught. And they get inside the HUD, they get one filter, and they're like, no, let's get two, right? Just to really stick it to the man. And then Thurgood is just staring at, you just see a scene of this Thurgood is staring at a screen. They're like, Thurgood, what's going on? And it's just toilet paper. And it's like 2-ply, like the good toilet paper. And he's like, he opens it, he's like, oh, they got pure white. Like, treating it like cocaine. So they rob all the toilet paper from HUD, and the whole scene is, HUD, they end up, Thurgood ends up taking like a 40, and an alarm system goes off, so they run out and escape. And the whole episode is Thurgood like trying to tell them like, hide the toilet paper. But Miss Avery, she knits her dog a sweater out of the toilet paper. And everyone's using it, and then eventually they get caught. But it's the filter cost 37 cents, and I don't know if I brought that up. The filter cost 37 cents, and they weren't willing to provide it to them. So, and to your point of, the government's always going to screw you over, right? And there's an episode of him and one of the governors who was like a wrestler, and they're trying to like separate them. Did you see that one?
No.
Okay, damn, we ain't watched any of the same episodes.
Yeah, which is great. I was going to say at the end, I feel like we always try not to do that, and we actually did that.
So episode 8, Let's Get Ready to Crumble. Thurgood wrestles with the center of the state. And I kind of watched it in and out, so this is loose memory. But like the plot twist is that Thurgood used to be a famous wrestler too. But the governor of the state is, I think he's looking to like demolish the projects and build something else there. And he offers them all like maybe $1,000 or $5,000, and they're going to be separated and live in different areas. And at the end of the day, they decide not to. Like, they want to stay together. They want to stay together as a community. And granted, they're mad about the money. They wanted the money. But at the end of the day, right, it's always this community sticking together, because that's what's most important. Like we talked about this in the first episode. I don't want new neighbors because I'm not going to kick out Haiti Lady because I don't know who's going to replace her. I want to just stay with my community, stay with the people I know. I can deal with whatever it is. We can go back and forth. We can joke on each other. We can shit on each other. And at the end of the day, we both can take it because we're still gonna live in the same area together. And come together when we need to. And I think that's the overall most important thing for me is just the community. And I guess a sub theme, which we talked about in the first episode also, was just showing a different light of the Black experience that I think people don't people don't want displayed because they feel, rather Black people don't want displayed because they feel like it's offensive or damaging. Like I know you said you took offense to some things. Like it's a real experience. These are real characters. These are real stories, right? It's I think it's important. I think it's important to have all type of dynamics. Like I was thinking about Honey Boo Boo Child, and think about all the reality TV that displays all these different type of groups of people and all spectrum of lights, negative, positive, controversial, toxic. So I think again the show was just kind of maybe way, way, way ahead of its time, but also I don't think it would be allowed to exist at any other point in time. Like I think when it came out then, like that was it. I don't think this show would come out now. I don't think people would support it. I don't think people would watch it. Because people are just too sensitive, and people just want to show off the like going back to the holidays topic, right? People just want to show off one side of themselves. They don't want to show the full, multifaceted, flaws, good, bad versions of themselves, and that's kind of the decline of society. Everyone's perpetrating a fraud.
Yeah, I hear you. I do think that a show like this is something that has its place somewhere. And we shared it in our previous episode. The show is available; all 3 seasons is available on Hulu, so you can watch it. But the reason I say it has its place is because I shared it on my social media. I also talked to some people about it. I had a meeting earlier today, and I brought up the episode. And when I said to them the PJs, they had no clue what I was talking about. They were lost. I was like, claymation, animation, 99. They were like, we have no idea what you're talking about. So then I
Were they
pulled out.
Black? Were they
They were
Hispanic,
black.
white?
They were
Okay.
black. I pull out my phone. I pull them up on the internet. I slide my phone over. They look at it like, oh yeah. I watched that show. I love it. I never knew the name was the PJs, and I'm like, okay. And they're like, I love that show. That shit was hilarious. It was great. And in my head, obviously you haven't seen it in 20 years, so maybe you don't remember the name, but it had its place. When I posted it on my social media, everybody was commenting on different episodes, and they were just super excited. Like, man, this show was so funny. And, I feel like everything has its place. It was something, especially someone who was a teenager back then, it was something really, really cool. And as an adult, it has its now the undertones of some of the things that they do make sense to me more than what it did back then. So now I see
Right.
it in a different light. So that's why, I can say, oh, this feels offensive. But watching it as a 12, 13-year-old kid, I was laughing my ass off. I thought it was the funniest thing ever.
Right.
And I remember some of the episodes I'm watching now. I remember seeing those episodes when I was younger. So, it has its place. I feel like there are platforms out there that it should be on because it does give an authentic light. And the puns are just out of control. Like some of the puns that they'll do it to music, they'll do it to comedy, they do it to movies, they say different things, and it's just funny. But one thing that's constant, and I wrote this down in my notes, is that every time you see Thurgood in Marion's apartment, you see a picture of Martin Luther King on the back wall. Every single time that picture is
Never
there,
noticed that. I never
and
noticed that.
and that's something.
You got a good eye, man. You catching the nuances, man. I like that. I like that. I like that.
I
Salute,
just
man.
it just kind of comes. I know that we're going to talk about it, so I pay attention to it even more. And I find that that picture could have been of it could have been of a cartoon character, or it could have been something, but it's Martin Luther King. There's even an episode where, oh man, I can't remember if it's season 1 or season 2, but there are episodes where there are highlights of things that you see, and you're like, man, that makes so much sense. To me, it makes more sense now in 2022 than it did back in 1999. Like you said, they were ahead of the game and ahead of their time. And we give shows like The Simpsons so much love, and we give shows like South Park so much love, but the PJs deserves it to their respect as well, 100%. And not just because it's a black, quote unquote, black show, I guess, but because a lot of that shit that they talk about in the show is real. These are real life things that we witnessed as people that are from these areas and from this part of town. And
Right.
people seeing it for the first time, they may think it's funny, but it's some real shit. Like there's a crackhead in my neighborhood that to me was what could have been the smartest guy in my neighborhood, but he had a drug problem.
Right.
I've dealt with that. So there are kids out there that I had in my community that were literally just like Smokey, heavy set. I'm not Smokey. Just like Juicy, heavy set kids who were super talented but needed to be pulled in a certain way to show their talents, but was always teased and always was the butt of the jokes. Like I see that, same thing with Miss Avery. Miss Avery blind, she can't hear, but she gangster. She mean as hell.
Right.
Like, I feel like those are people that some of us who grew up in those areas, it just takes you back to those people. Like you say, you see a boy in Walter, and that's what it's all about. And I can appreciate that more than anything when it comes to watching a series.
I loved all of that, man. And that all kind of ties in with the cultural significance. And I feel like overall, a lot of what we're saying is just kind of expanding on the same idea of the diversity, the community aspect and the representation being important. In the last episode, I talked about the episode with Juicy being a chef and wanting more from him. Like, I wish, Juicy could be an amazing chef, right? He has the palate for it. So then seeing the episode where he has like the tension with his parents and, there's some type of liberation, right? Like, granted in in old TV, right, we only get a segment of people's lives. So for me, I see the episode where I see his talent. I see his hidden talent. I see the episode of what's limiting him, right? His parents, their eating and the way they treat him and use him and occupy so much of his time. And you see that episode resolve with him getting more freedom. And, maybe you'll never see another episode about Juicy and his future and cooking and potential. But I think the hope, and I think going back to that episodes being standalone and why they never feel like growth is hoping that it gets resolved. And at some point, Juicy does what he needs to do. Like for a second, I was thinking of like doing a PJ's reboot, right? Where they're adults, but then it would be sad to see Calvin and Juicy some of the projects, right? Like, there wasn't any growth for them. And throughout their experience, maybe that's the I like this. Maybe that's the most important thing, right? The message to the children, right? The message to the next generation. Calvin just feels like a bad kid. I don't know. Calvin, I didn't see any talent in Calvin. There's an episode where him and Juicy wanted to rap and they had Snoop Dogg being a special guest voice. But I'm wondering if, I guess, looking at it from the lens of the children, like forget the adults, they're old, they are who they are, they're never going to change, right? The children have more likelihood to change and grow. The influence that everyone has, like we talked about the first episode where the teachers go on strike and everyone in the community comes together to teach them, educate them. The episode where Super builds him a tree house. I think he uses like an old elevator.
Of course he does.
Right. He builds him a tree house, right? He resolves the issue with him and his dad. The message, I guess, the message for me that I'm seeing now, like while thinking and talking about it, is really just showing the next generation the importance of community and knowing that when Calvin and Juicy get older, everyone else is going to die respectfully, right? So their choice, right, is they can stay in the projects and, rebuild the same type of community atmosphere. Maybe Calvin becomes a super. There is an episode where Calvin and Calvin talks about wanting to become a super. Yeah. This episode where Calvin talks about wanting to become a super, and super ends up buying him like a tool belt to help him. Maybe that's his destiny, right? But, and not saying that there's anything wrong with living in the projects, right? Like it is what it is. Your life situation is what it is. But maybe for me, the message and the significance, I guess, going back to that, is there's a growth in teaching the future generation the building blocks of what a community looks like. So if they do move out of the projects, they understand the foundations. They understand the foundations, and they remember the experience that they have, that they had growing up, and they're willing, or they have a drive to kind of embody that and create that experience for themselves wherever they go. Yeah.
Yeah, man, that was well said. I'll piggyback off of that by saying that I love the way you thought about them moving forward, and I think that is a great segue into how this show it can affect or has affected the Black experience. And I think it'd be really dope if we look at it from that perspective. Like, what if there was a season 4 or a new 2022 PJs?
Right.
Would it be Calvin left the project and came back, and or Juicy stayed? What would that look like? Who would be new characters? Right? Would there be, what are the projects like now that differ from what they were 20, 30 years ago? And I think that is something that could be really, really cool to see, a claymation animation show where you have kind of like, how they did with Full House, kind of the Fuller House type thing. But, the PJs, back at the habitat or something, back at the lot. Like, I think that could be really cool. That's a great point. And another point I wanted to make was the first episode in season 2 where Calvin and Juicy are playing Star Gang Wars.
I don't remember that. First episode of season 2?
Yeah, first episode of season 2. They're downstairs in like the cellar and they're playing it. And he's like, I am your father. Like to me, how they create things to do in fun ways to like. I just thought that was so cool for those two to be the only kids, and there are other kids throughout the series you see, but those two are always together. They're essentially best friends. I don't really say they're best friends, but they're best friends. And to see the stuff that they do together, it cracks me up. It could be playing chess and they arguing, or there's just so many different things, and that was really cool. But I would love to see if I don't know who made the show. Was it Fox or? Well, I guess they picked it up. Whoever the writers and creators of the show, if you listen to this episode, to our podcast, which I believe there are people out there listening to it, I need to do a nice PJ's reboot on letting Calvin and Juicy be your main characters and add some cool characters around it. But who would those people be?
It's funny. I was thinking, and I'll answer. I'll try to use my imagination. On one aspect, I like the idea of maybe Calvin being the super because it follows lead with that episode where him and Super are working together. And maybe he has a picture of Super, like instead of Martin Luther King Jr., Super inspired him. So he has a picture of Super in his crib. I like that. And maybe it's just Calvin. I want Juicy to be a chef, man. I want Juicy to thrive and be a renowned chef, right? Whatever that is relative to him. But I was also thinking of. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say it has to be something crazy. So he has to be like a renowned chef at like the homeless shelter or like the penitentiary. It can't just be. He's just like it has a tie to what the show's
cynicism. Cynicism. He grew, but he ain't grown that much cynicism. I respect it. But one thing I was thinking about is I haven't lived in I guess the hood or whatever around the projects in years, so I don't even know what it's like anymore. I don't know if crackheads still exist. I don't really know the dynamic. So I was thinking about making it related to gentrification. Like that'd be
great.
A gentrified PJs, or PJs like with Vanderveer. Right now, I think it's called Vanderveer Estates, and
or Flatbush Gardens.
Flatbush Gardens. There we go. And there's white people living in the projects now. I like free ideas, but also like come sign us. We have ideas. I can write. Thomas is creative. So we got this. We got this, man.
Well, that would be so. Now you just make me think.
Let's pitch it.
I can see them having a bus driver, like the MTA, or we got somebody who drive a dollar van. You never see his face. You just the windows are just low enough for you to see their eyes. You can never see their face.
I like that, man. I like that.
Yeah, let's make it happen. But yeah, thinking about what the Black experience is, and what I feel like everything we talk about, it has its place, but the biggest thing is we evolve, right? The show evolved, even though it was season 1 was one thing and season 2 is different, and obviously we'll get into season 3 when we do our Clubhouse. The show is evolving. The development is not what we see in live action shows because it's different. It's a different type of show, but there is development, and I have to be fair. Talking to you about this, starting this conversation, I was like, I don't really see anything different. But after we've dived into it, there is a lot of things that we see that have changed or that's been highlighted. But we didn't really see it that way because it's similar to what we saw in season 1. It's not exactly the same, but there's similarities. So yeah, there's definitely some development, but it's a little different than what it would be if it was, again, like a different world or Family Matters.
Right. That's it, man. You have anything else on your end? You wanna bring up any questions?
Nah, man. This is great as always, man. Appreciate the convo. I will say those of you who do check this episode out, definitely dive into the seasons, right? Like we said, they're available on Hulu. And then share your perspective. That's one thing. We just love to hear perspective. So let us know your thoughts. Did you like the show? Were you someone who this is your first time watching it? And what are your thoughts? And, leave a comment on our social medias. Even, write a review about the podcast. Tell us what you think.
Right. As much as we get on the mic, we also do the Clubhouse because we want people to watch the media, watch the movies, watch the TV shows, listen to the albums, listen to what we're saying, kind of get some additional feedback, but also bring in your own experiences, bring in your own stories. Like I had a lot of fun in the Kwanzaa Clubhouse because we had like a good 4 or 5 people to sharing different stories and different experiences. And that's what we want. Like it's not about me and Thomas's experience, right? That's us talking, but the experience is about the Black experience and what we might have missed and new ways to kind of gain perspective. So next week, Thursday, we're doing our Clubhouse recap, episodes 1 and 2, but also touching on episode 3.
Season
6 p.m. Season 3. Excuse me, at 6 p.m. EST. Yeah, you can follow us on. Well, we already have that. I'm sorry. I'm
we'll jump into
regular outro mode. Yeah. All right.
So just to wrap it up, I'll also say, and I don't think I need to say this, but I'm going to say it because I think it's important. No matter what you're working on, Clifford and I started this podcast several months ago, and every week we learn something new. And I feel like where we are today, we wouldn't be where we are if we didn't go through the growing pains. So, we really appreciate you guys rocking with us and rocking through some of the sound issues and some of the blurps we have. We want to bring it to you guys as authentic as possible. So a lot of it we don't delete, we leave it in, and you get to enjoy the conversation. So, thanks for being a part of the ride. Yeah, we keep it 100, man. That's all we know. So, we're continuing to build, and it's been a dope ride. So thanks for riding with us.
All right. Till next time, peace.
Peace out. Thanks for listening. You can find us on Clubhouse for bi-weekly club discussions and occasional recaps at Nothing Moves Without Us. Please follow our TikTok and Instagram at A Black Culture Podcast. And you can watch our podcast episodes on YouTube at Nothing Moves Without Us, A Black Culture Podcast.